We want to embark on our continuation of our lecture series on policy. We have looked at various aspects of the policy, and today we want to look at the approaches that policymakers and implementers often employ when they are implementing policy. Broadly, there are two approaches that policymakers can adopt when implementing policy. And these are the top-down approach and the bottom-up approach. Today, we want to focus on one of them, and this is the top-down approach. Our discussion in this area will focus on a number of issues, including what is meant by top-down approach and the various aspects that inform this kind of approach, and also some of the advantages and disadvantages of this approach. So I want to welcome all of us for this particular important discussion. We want to begin by looking at what is meant by the top-down approach. This approach can be understood as a policy implementation strategy where top-level executive of the implementation agency take charge of the implementation of the policy with minimal engagement of lower-level personnel and grassroots stakeholders. Remember, in our examination or discussion of policy-making process, we noted that there are several stakeholders that are key, not only when making policies, but also when implementing it. So when we talk of top-down approach, we simply mean that the top-level management of the agency that is in charge of the implementation of the policy is taking charge of the implementation of that policy, but with very minimal, if any, engagement of the personnel at the lower level, as well as organizations or stakeholders at the grassroots level. In this approach to social policy implementation, information normally filters down through the different levels of the organization that is implementing the policy based on a hierarchical structure, with those at the bottom of the chain of the policy receiving their instructions last. The approach implies that the top-level executives of the implementing agency make all the decisions, and in doing so, they restrict the role of lower-level stakeholders to just putting decisions into practice. The involvement of lower-level stakeholders is quite minimal, and in many cases, they are simply instructed to do certain things. Otherwise, major decisions that go into the implementation of the policy is done and executed by the top level managers of the implementing agency. This form of approach to policy implementation has certain strengths, and these strengths include greater clarity. Policy specialists observe that the top-level approach results in clear, well-organized processes that leave little room for confusion, since all decisions are made in one place and all communication flows in one direction. Again, since the decision-making process takes place at just one level of management, they can be finalized, distributed, and implemented much more quickly than decisions that require the input from multiple stakeholders. Further, top-level executives have a lot of experience behind them with the know-how to negotiate around problems in a way that makes the lower cadre personnel with less experience that they cannot manage. Therefore, with all decisions coming from the same source and communication flowing in one direction, things such as misunderstandings between different entities can be kept to a bare minimum. Furthermore, alignment around common goals, strategies, and objectives, which is only possible because of centralized decision-making process, minimizes confusion and fosters collective effort towards policy implementation. Just to add something on that, what essentially we mean here is that when the implementation of a policy emanates from a central source, which in this case is a top executive, it is quite clear who is in charge of what and what kind of information is communicated downward, with very clear instructions, very clear guidelines, and also resources that are aligned to specific activities that go into the implementation of the policy. In that case, therefore, this element makes this approach to be considered as have greater clarity than the other approach, which is the bottom-up approach. The other important strength here is also on the aspect of accountability. And this approach to policy implementation allows top executives to track problems or inefficiencies that may occur in the course of implementation. This is because the existence of clearly defined teams with distinct responsibilities enables top executives to easily locate, diagnose, and solve problems much quickly and also with greater efficiency. Again, a top-down approach can also streamline communication, which can help clarify what information needs to flow between different levels of the organization that are responsible for policy implementation. Further, it also ensures that important messages and strategies are communicated clearly and directly from the top, thereby making all members responsible for policy implementation being on the same page. What we essentially mean here is that when a top-down approach is employed in implementing policy, it is clear that the source of the responsibility of policy implementation lies with the top management. And therefore, any failure in terms of not doing certain things correctly, the blame can squarely be located or apportioned to the top level executives. But again, we're also saying that because top level executive of the implementing agency are fully in charge of what is going on, it is easier also for them to track changes and possibly get to understand where problems might have occurred that probably led to the undesired outcome of the policy implementation. This is unlike when the other approach is used, where a lot of the players are involved And therefore, sometimes where things have gone wrong, there could be an element of blame game because different players are brought on board, and some of them might play their role and others might not play. So because of that hazard nature, it becomes quite difficult to locate exactly where things didn't work, and for purposes now to see where the blame can be apportioned or which measures can be put in place to remedy the situation. The other strength that has been identified as being critical in the top-down approach to policy implementation is that one of the efficiency. And the top-down approach simplifies decision-making processes by focusing on the main priority areas, which helps filter out less relevant issues and concentrate resources on critical areas. Again, since the decision-making process takes place at just one level of management, they can be finalized, distributed, and implemented much more quickly than decisions that require input from several stakeholders. This method, again, is also cost-effective since lower-level personnel receive strict instructions from top executives, thereby resulting in less time loss on work execution. The approach also allows rapid communication of decisions, updates, as well as changes. And all these help to improve uh, sharing critical information with a large number of personnel within a short time. And in this case, therefore, the element of efficiency comes in because the speed with which issues are tackled, issues are addressed, issues are communicated, feedbacks are received, and responses that are appropriate are delivered. That is what we mean by efficiency. Efficiency is about achieving goals within the shortest time possible, but also using the least amount of resources. So we are saying here that when several layers of the implementation process are eliminated and we remain with few layers, it is possible for communication to trickle down and reach the lowest level possible within a short time. And again, because the top executive have powers of execution, it is easier for them to give strict and direct instructions to lower level personnel and grassroots organization in terms of what they need to do. And the process, therefore, things are likely to move fairly faster if there is goodwill and if there is there are resources that have been put in place to help in the implementation of the policy. Another important strength that experts of public policy point as being associated with top-down approach is the fact that it is easier for management as well as control. And they argue that this approach to policy implementation facilitates management control as the hierarchy and roles are clearly defined from the outset. Since higher level managers can more easily oversee and coordinate various parts of policy implementation, and since each lower level's activities are designed to align with the top level objectives, the approach also facilitates planning as well as allocation of resources with a comprehensive view from the top. It is easier for top executives to plan and allocate resources effectively across different aspects of the policy. The approach, therefore, makes it easier for top executives of the implementing agencies to assess needs and distribute resources in a manner that supports the most critical aspects of policy implementation. Because of this, top-level managers can have a very clear bird's view of what is going on, and through that, they can easily manage and put all the activities, all the personnel, all the implementation stages within their purview. And in doing so, it becomes easier for them to control and direct how implementation activities are undertaken. They can give guidelines. They can easily observe whether standards are being adhered to. They can also be in a position to locate where problems are and to come up with remedies so that easier detection of problems or hindrances that could undermine the implementation of the policy becomes easily possible, and in doing so, management is able to come up with remedies so that policies can be implemented not only in a timely manner, but also in an efficient manner. But again, there are certain drawbacks or weaknesses that policy specialists or experts have considered to be associated with the top-down approach to policy implementation. I now, therefore, want us to turn our attention to the weaknesses of the top-down approach to policy implementation. One of the weaknesses that has been highlighted by experts is that this approach to policy implementation is quite strenuous, it is quite difficult, it is quite cumbersome, it is quite involving, because it is based on the power and authority of those at higher levels of administration with little work left to other stakeholders. Top executives, in this case, shoulder most of the responsibilities that go into policy implementation. And since lower level personnel are not empowered as decision makers, they don't feel a sense of obligation to contribute to policy implementation. And therefore, the concentration of the entire task of policy implementation to top executives can be quite strenuous and laborious. What it means here is that if the top executive is not there, then to give direction and to give orders and to give resources, then the policy implementation can stall. This is because little involvement of lower level personnel and grassroots stakeholders means that they may not learn, they may not appreciate, and they may not know what exactly needs to be done if one or two things are not going according to plan. Because of that, it is not possible for them to intervene and address problems that they may encounter, because their little involvement implies that they do not master sufficient skills and knowledge that they can use to address certain things without making reference to the top executive. It means, therefore, that all the work has to be shouldered by top executive. And this is why we are saying that that can make the implementation of the policy using this approach quite strenuous and also laborious, because they have to put in a lot of manpower for them to see to it that the policy is implemented. The other problem that has been identified, or weakness that has been identified as being associated with the top-down approach to policy implementation, is that one of limited innovation. It is noted that this approach limits creativity as it allows fewer opportunities for creative collaboration and flexibility, which may eliminate fresh perspectives and stifle innovation. The top-down approach can stifle innovation as decisions are primarily driven by a small group of top executives. New ideas from frontline staff or grassroots stakeholders may not be considered or implemented, and this can hinder the organization's ability to adopt and evolve over time. Furthermore, since implementing teams have very well-defined responsibilities, they will not be proactive in solving management problems or issues that do not directly concern them. Frontline personnel may also not propose solutions that deviate from internally established standards and processes. And because of too much procedures, adherence procedures that have to be followed, bureaucracy, and instructions that have to be followed to the letter, it means therefore that other members of the organization, other than the top executive, may take very little initiative in terms of exploring how well the policy can be implemented and how well the policy can be made efficient. And in doing so, inability to do that means that they will limit themselves to use those approaches that have already been developed without making adjustments or changes, because doing so, out of fear that doing so could result in serious repercussions or serious reprisals from the top management. So if we do this, it means therefore that the implementation of the policy will follow strictly laid down procedures, laid down regulations, without making attempt to look at other possible ways on how the implementation policies can be made easier and more efficient. And that way, it kills creativity and it kills innovation. And in doing so, it might even affect the extent to which organization easily adopts change. Uh, this type of policy approach to implementation has also been cited for its discriminatory nature. Uh, and the argument is that when all decisions are made at the top and the rest of the team might feel that their feedback and opinions are unworthy, and as such may simply opt to disengage. And top leaders within an organization may come up with implementation strategies that excludes the inputs of other stakeholders, thereby subjecting policy implementation to resistance from dissatisfied stakeholders. Further, when decisions are made exclusively by the upper management, other stakeholders may feel excluded, and this might lead to reduced motivation as well as satisfaction. And therefore, policy implementing agencies should embrace the spirit of consultations and engagement in aspects of policy implementation to enhance commitment of stakeholders. Indeed, this approach emphasizes the heavy involvement of top managers as far as implementation of the policy is concerned. And they are not under obligation to involve the lower level managers as well as grassroots stakeholders. Therefore, there is an element of divide between the top management and other players. And this is what amounts to discrimination. Discrimination in the sense that if some if top level management drives the implementation of these policies to the exclusion of other players, then it means therefore that the needs the need and the input of other players is not only embraced, but also are never given a chance because of the overbearing involvement and force of the top management. In doing so, there is the element that some players might feel left out, and therefore this can also create apathy in terms of how much they engage, how much they contribute, and how much they support the implementation of the policies. The other aspect that has been identified as another weakness of this approach to policy implementation is that one to do with change management. Organizations that embrace the top-down approach may find it quite hard to adopt to change, since limited engagement of other stakeholders undermines the ability of inventors to identify emerging trends and potential disruptions. Therefore, this model does not value input from a wide range of stakeholders across different roles and levels, and therefore inability to embrace diversity of perspectives might lead to narrow decisions. And this top-down approach might struggle also to adapt to rapidly changing environments or unforeseen circumstances, since decisions made at the top may overlook emerging trends or unexpected challenges. And this makes top-down approach very rigid when it comes to reacting to possible changes in strategy or solving complex problems that emerge in the course of implementation. I want to emphasize that if lower level personnel and grassroots stakeholders were involved, it is easier for top management to have a holistic understanding of the environment under which the policies are being implemented. By therefore excluding them, it means that the feedback from the ground about how the policy is performing might not be comprehensive. And therefore, the top management, even if they lay out strategies of addressing certain challenges that are being faced in the implementation of the policy, the information they have or the feedback they have may not be comprehensive because of the exclusion of other players in the implementation of the policy. So that in case of any sudden change, it becomes difficult for top managers to timely embrace change and also address possible consequences or possible ways through which certain sudden change may undermine the implementation of the policy. So it's argued that where a policy implementation engages just a fraction of the stakeholders, then it becomes difficult for such organizations to appreciate the entire policy implementation environment. And in doing so, they will end up missing certain elements that, if otherwise, they had could help them in coming up with strategies that addresses emerging issues and emerging concerns. So this indeed makes it difficult for top level managers to develop strategies that comprehensively and adequately addresses emerging challenges. That marks the end of our discussion, and I want to thank all of you for your time and for listening to me. You are free to raise any question or appreciation through the comments section. Thank you so much.